Redditors related to a psychopath. What is your creepiest holy shit, I might get murdered story? Not me, but my cousin, 11 at the time, was caught smoking and skipping school by my mother. My mum told him she didn't care about him skipping school because his mother wouldn't have cared, but told him not to smoke by her car. He didn't like being told what to do, so he grabbed my brother, 2 at the time, by the hand and walked him out into the middle of the road by a blind corner. He sat my brother down and told him not to move. Then he walked away. Luckily, a neighbor had seen what had happened and grabbed my brother before a car could hit him. That cousin is now in an Indonesian prison, possibly facing the death sentence for smuggling drugs. By the way, dreams really do come true, I guess. I had several with my brother, but the worst was when I woke up to him sitting on my chest with his hands around my throat. He was trying to choke me, but his hands were too small, and he didn't get the pressure right, so I ended up with a giant hickey around the entire front of my neck instead of death. All because I ate the last nutty bar. My younger brother, who I'm still living with, has about 2 months ago started to get very aggressive towards his classmates, and has also been kicking our dogs and things like that. My parents have tried to punish him, but the only way they feel as if they can get through to him is through spanking him and whatnot. He has told me all this does is make him more angry, and about 2 days ago he told me, "You're pretty unlucky you don't have a lock on your door some nights. I also wake up to weird noises in the hallway connecting my room to his, so yeah, that's worrying." Update: they went to a therapist and they believe that he may have depression and some form of social anxiety. I do know that's a pretty quick diagnosis, but I trust the therapist and her opinion. He should be getting some more therapy for it, and medication if he can get it. Thank you all for the advice and help in the situation. I didn't think my sister would murder me, Paresi, because she enjoyed abusing me too much to straight up kill me, lol. One of the biggest things that sticks out from my childhood growing up with her abuse was occasionally if I was sitting on the couch, back of couch facing kitchen, she'd come up behind me and run a butcher knife along my shoulders and neck until I turned around and realized she had a knife. I think she just enjoyed the fear in me realizing what was going on. That look of "oh my god, that was a knife. Why the fuck do you have a knife?" My sister did shit like this my whole childhood, and even after she was 19 and I was 17 she'd do crazy shit like throw a knife across the living room at me if she was mad enough at me. I cut contact with her as soon as I was able to leave at 18. My mom was 19 when I was born, and we had a very close relationship when I was little. She was always more of a friend than a mom, and that's just how our relationship was. Before my stepdad, I was always sarcastic all the time, and we joked around a lot. One morning my mom asked me to take the pizza boxes from last night's dinner out to the garage, where we put the cardboard recycling. I jokingly told her no as I gathered up the boxes to take them out. I took them out, put them on top of the stack of other cardboard, and turned around to go back into the house, and I bumped into my stepdad who had come in behind me without me noticing. He then proceeded to lift my 13-year-old body completely off of the ground by my throat and pinned me against the wall of the house. He got in my face and was screaming at me about disrespect. I remember flecks of spit getting on my face. My feet were back on the ground, but I was still pinned, and his hands were around my throat. I was able to get one of his hands in my mouth, and I was biting and scratching him. I don't remember what happened next. I don't remember how I got to school. The next thing I remember is sobbing in a private ensemble room in the band hall. My mom still doesn't believe me. Over the next 2 years he continuously got worse and permanently destroyed my relationship with my mother. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow when he was home. I started running away and doing drugs. Eventually my behavior became bad enough that my mom sent me to live with my biological father. Life is better now. I'm safe. I still have the occasional nightmare and cannot stand any sort of confrontation whatsoever, but I'll be okay. I have a male cousin who I strongly suspect is some kind of sociopath. When I was a child, I'm female by the way, I lived next door. He was in high school and I was in grade school. His family had a pool and we would often go over and hang out, which I'd rather be/see this cousin would, when no one was looking, sneak up on me and either throw me into the water or get in with me if I were already in. and hold me under until I was so out of breath I would actually breath in water and go limp, and he would pull me up with me coughing and choking, or I would claw desperately gasping for breath. He was laughing all the way. It was horrendous, and it was creepy how jovial his expression was. He did this all the time, and his parents or one of mine, usually my grandmother, would either mildly admonish him if caught, or he would do it when no one was around. For some reason I was afraid to tell the extent of his abuses. There were smaller things, little acts of harassment like scaring me, taking my stuff, pulling my hair, taunting me, but the near drownings were the worst. This all went down B/W the ages of me being 5 to 9, and he was 14 to 18. He also picked me up and literally held me, feet first, over the railing of the Royal Gorge Bridge on a family vacation. I think I went into shock, and I just recall becoming very still. For that he did get in trouble at least. He apologized B/C he was forced, but his eyes were always kind of dead, but with a sparkle, if he were doing something egregious. Like a happy kind of twinkle. Oh yay, once he had his brother hold me down, while he poured tequila down my throat. He did get caught for that B/C I had to go to the As a kid he was always running away, and once killed a stray cat by choking it with barbed wire. He had on some kind of leather gloves. Weird thing is that all the neighborhood boys thought it was cool, rather than call out his crazy. When he turned 16 and drove, he would purposefully run over stray animals and laugh and brag about it. No one did one thing. Enablers for sure. Talk about normalizing/minimizing bizarre behavior. He was extremely good looking, like model material, but not to me B/C I saw what he was under the skin. The high school quarterback, adored by all. Girls fought over him. He played football on a scholarship at a Division I second school, but suffered a knee injury that ended his career. In high school and college he was always getting in trouble, frequent fights and DUIs, but he got bailed out every time and again, probably due to his athletic ability. It was swept under the rug. He also bragged he had his girlfriends do his schoolwork. He has been married 3 times and has stuck with his 3rd wife, who is a martyr type. Scary thing is he is now a high school football coach and has been for decades, and was just promoted to assistant principal. Scary, because I think he has no business working with minors. My mom, brother, and I came home to find all of my mother's diplomas and certificates had been gathered into a pile on the floor of our shared bedroom and burned. My mom is blind and had not been given much schooling as a child, so she worked her ass off once we were in school to get an education. Unfortunately, at this time we were forced to live with my grandmother and 2 mentally ill uncles. One of the uncles had a grow room, and the other didn't approve of pot, so he destroyed the room and blamed my mother. Dealer uncle became enraged and decided to burn my mom's certificates. Because you destroyed something I love, so I destroyed something you love. Your kids are next. This was a week after he shot my brother's cat because he was angry she had kittens in his boat. I've blocked out the next couple of weeks because apparently they were pretty bad, but I'm told that we had to disappear that night with only what we could carry in garbage bags. Started chatting with a girl online, and after a bit she sheepishly admitted that she had a criminal record. We went on chatting for a bit. She was cute and very interested in me, but of course the conversation eventually led us back to the criminal question. Turns out she was on parole. Now I needed the story of how she got into trouble. She finally took a pic of her parole document and sent it to me. I was reading it and came to the line where it listed the offense she had committed. Homicide. Can you say ghosted? Needless to say, we never met. Eye roll. Listening to my dad trying to persuade my mum they should kill me. I was about 8 maybe. I was a difficult child and my dad often couldn't cope. I remember sitting on the stairs while they were in the lounge listening to their argument. Eventually he persuaded my mum and I heard them moving, so I ran upstairs to hide. My dad came up and dragged me into the lounge. He was holding me down in the floor shouting to my mum, "Do you want me to do it? I'll do it if you wanted me to." She was crying and couldn't decide. Eventually she said no, and he let me go, and I ran back upstairs. I think they planned to kill me a few times, but that was the scariest one. Another time my dad asked me to give him a hand getting something out of the shed. When my back was turned he hit me in the back of the head with a hammer. I turned around, and he was staring at me. His eyes looked like they were going to pop out. I ran past him to go to my mum who was making dinner in the kitchen. I was crying and shouting about what just happened, but she didn't look at me or say anything. She wasn't shocked. It was like she knew what he was going to do. I have a cousin who I always knew was kind of crazy. We live in a major city and he never leaves his family's apartment. He just stays in the apartment drawing and playing games. But even though he's weird, I didn't really mind, because he's usually very sweet and wouldn't hurt a fly, or so I thought. When I was in college, I took him and my friend to see a concert. We got pretty drunk, and when we came back we were hanging out in his living room. His parents were out of town. He started drawing in his little book and I asked to see it. Turns out he was drawing me sitting there. It was an extremely detailed and accurate drawing of me. I flipped through the book and found all sorts of cool creatures and landscapes until I landed on a drawing of his brother, dead and mutilated. An extremely detailed drawing. Turn the page. My dad, dead and mutilated. Turn the page. Me, dead and mutilated. Quietly, my cousin says, did you find the drawings of the family? I was in shock and disbelief. What the fuck is this? Why the fuck would you draw our family like this? He says something like, I think about it all the time. I think about killing you and the rest of them all the time. My friend and I look at each other, frightened and silently planning on how we are going to get out of there. Our shoes were off and our stuff was downstairs. He could see we were upset. He looked disappointed, like we were trying to upset him. Are you scared? And as he said that he moved to the kitchen. You had to go past the kitchen to get out of the apartment. I was really worried that he was going to get a knife and try to stab us or something. I said, haha, no, they're really good. Was just surprised at first. They're really impressive though. I had to basically placate him into thinking I was okay with the drawings so that he would let us leave. He never did anything like this again, but he gets really weird and creepy whenever he drinks or smokes weed. I told my parents about what happened and they just kind of shrugged and said, wow, that's weird. My aunt has 2 kids, both adopted, and all I know about their bio moms is that they were drug addicts. One of them, we'll call her Jane, is my age, and we were always really close, but her older brother, John, never really hung around us to the point that I barely knew him, even though I spent a ton of time at their house. Anyway, when we were maybe 12, Jane, my sister, and I built a massive blanket fort in the basement and were hanging out in it. John was maybe 15 at the time and I don't know why he originally came in, but for some reason he decided to mess with us by taking a large kitchen knife and randomly stabbing into the fort. We were trying to crawl away, but he could hear us and followed to whatever section we were in. I'm not sure if blindly stabbing at your relatives can ever really be playful, but this was not it. Jane was screaming at him to stop, and my sister and I were crying. It was terrifying. Finally, my aunt heard us screaming and came down and yelled at him. John claimed it was just a joke and said we were having fun. He's now in the middle of a 25-year prison sentence for murder. My dad has NPD and is generally an emotionless asshole. When I was in middle school I stepped on a stick in our yard and a piece broke off in my foot. My dad is a software engineer and used to go on site to build databases and help switch patient data to digital through the 80s, 90s, zeros. It gave him a real complex about not being a doctor and he stole tools and little pieces of equipment and would wear scrubs all of the time. It also meant he refused to take me to the ER for a super simple thing. He heated up a pair of medical scissors and cut the heel of my foot open while pretending to play doctor. At several times my mom opened the door to tell me to stop screaming so she could hear her phone conversation. When I was 12, I disrespected his authority by performing what he deemed a gay act in his presence. Specifically, I played punch buggy. And I want you to bear in mind as you read this that I was never one of those asshole kids who used it as an excuse to really hit someone. It was no more violent than tag. The reason he had a problem with it is because he took it as gay. If you'd like to simulate what happened to me next, touch the base of your right thumb to your right shoulder. Then rotate your shoulder inwards until your wrist is against your neck. Now place your right elbow on top of your left shoulder. Now imagine someone is driving their elbow into your left shoulder with most of their weight behind it. and suppose that you're in a car and wearing your seatbelt, so your feet are trapped, thus you have no free limbs to fight back with. At first I thought that, because he was my uncle, he wouldn't do anything to seriously injure me. So when he asked if I understood that I would never be doing that again, I said no. I don't like to tell blatant lies, and the truth was I had no intention of doing something or not doing something, based on his judgment ever again. The moment he started choking/strangling a 12-year-old without so much as a warning, he instantly lost every ounce of respect I ever had for him. I was wrong. He was no uncle of mine. He choked me harder and harder until I eventually noticed that I couldn't see anymore. Not enough oxygen was getting to my brain for that. It became clear that this was my last chance. I swear to respect him before the next time he tightened his hold, or I never see anything again. He was waiting for my affirmative submission, which I would be unable to provide if I lost consciousness. And so I lied in order to not die. Had an ex look at me intently and say, I don't understand why I can't destroy you. I've tried everything and it usually works, but you're still here. Then he fought and prolonged the divorce for years because he enjoyed watching people suffer. Convinced a few people for a while that I was a sick one, then his facade dropped. Too bad for him that the rest of us are actual sentient beings, and he's not as powerful or intelligent as his deluded chaos of a brain told him he was. I'm shocked by all these stories of psychopath childrens and the adults letting their kids be around them even after one incident. When I was about 4, my cousin tried sticking a stick up my ass. He literally lifted me off the ground with the stick and it only stopped with my screams and my dad ran outside. I was never around my cousin again. I never saw him again. He would have been 6 at the time, and at 23 he died of a heroin overdose after getting out of prison.